lesbianism? It's queer, it's kinky.
What, lesbian?
Mm.
Well, I suppose it's women acting together like normal men and women would.
Well, I think they're odd. Very odd. I can't understand why, but they are odd.
It doesn't appeal to me. It rather revolts me. I don't think it's a good thing.
I just feel rather sorry for them that they can't have the fullness and enrichment of life which a normal married person can have.
I think it's very difficult if you've never had any lesbian feelings yourself.
I would say that a lesbian is a person who finds the deepest emotional release with a member of her own sex. You see, with women, sex is a far more diffused matter than it is with men.
There are so many lesbians who are, through social prejudice, absolutely incapable of letting the world know. So we shall never know how many lesbians there are. It's only a good guess. And my good guess, if you want to know it, about, well, I would think it is about 5% of the female population.
One of the things that has always worried me, ever since I have started this work, is the inadequacies of doing, you know, a 10-minute or 20-minute program which doesn't disclose the true nature of homosexuality. It doesn't portray to people who are interested the kind of people who are homosexual, the kind of unidentifiable people whom you couldn't pick out in a crowded bus or in a tube train.
I believe that how the world is developing, that more and more the bisexual, truly bisexual nature of man will be acknowledged. Not that I mean that men should sleep with men and women should sleep with. There's nothing to do with it, because I'm speaking of love.
What is a lesbian?
Well, I think a lesbian is just a girl who likes the company, you know, who likes being in the company of people of her own sex, other girls. That's all, you know, nothing complicated.
Never in my life have I felt anything but perfectly normal. And I think it's about time, with all the prejudice in the world today, that somebody was honest and unafraid.
I don't think of myself as a lesbian at all. I think of myself as a person first and foremost, and my sexual proclivities. It's not really important to myself as a personality, I don't think.
I think there's quite a strong body of evidence for the theory that people are naturally bisexual, just as they are physically bisexual. We all have some elements of the other sex. And possibly the ancient Greeks were more sensible about this. They recognized that one could be attracted to either sex, and there was no need to make a fuss or a scandal about it, but it just was a fact of life.
The love between two women is so beautiful, it can be so beautiful, that I'm not saying that men cannot give a woman the love. I mean, some men can be very gentle and very understanding, but with a woman it goes much, much deeper.
Men are fascinated by it, even if they won't admit it. They're utterly fascinated because they think, how can a woman prefer another woman and not me?
Not only that, it's a sexual attraction to a lot of men. They think the thought of two women together is quite stimulating, but that's so bad because it's a natural relationship, the same as a man and a woman. It's just that you find it easier to love a woman than a man.
What they don't realize is that women can feel equal emotions between each other. I think that men can feel, as men can feel, between a man and a wife. And they somehow think it's either kinky or perverted or something. But it's not, it's completely natural to a lesbian.
Sex is an expression of what you feel for somebody, surely. In every relationship, it is probably the ultimate expression. And this is a point. People think that sex with a woman is just a kinkiness, just a variation, but it isn't. It's like any relationship. When you're really fond of somebody, you need to express it.
Lesbianism in itself is not an illness. It is in condition which goes back to the natural, innate bisexuality of every human being.
My father sort of left us when I was about 2½. He did come back very briefly when I was 3, and I heard them quarreling, and I sort of went downstairs. You know how things remain in one's memory. He was standing there looking very handsome by the door. My mother was in a white nightgown, and her hair was still long, and she was crying. When she saw me, she said, "Well, what about the child?" And he said, "You can have her. I prefer my dog."
Well, I was, in a way, turned against my father from a very young age, because my mother, he's a very, very sort of quiet, passive sort of man, and my mother's very, very dominant. And it just happened that I sort of used to listen to my mother and not to my father. I would do whatever she said.
When I was about 5, I used to like getting into bed with my mother, just for the warmth and the comfort. And I think that's why I've always felt more attracted to a woman than to a man, because a woman's body, you know, is sort of hard and resilient, and you feel as if you have to really put yourself out. And I can't do this. I've tried so many times to be completely straight, and it's driven me to psychiatrists, overdoses, suicide.
It is a mother, the dear old mother fixation, which has in particular a nostalgic turn, because also is bound up with emotional frustrations, because the feeling of a girl that she comes second and the father or a brother is preferred makes her more emotional towards her own sex, namely her mother.
It's a mother figure thing at first, I'm certain of this. When one is a child, perhaps one doesn't get something from one's mother that one needs or requires. I mean, I come from a very loving family background, but I felt at times that I failed my mother and she failed me. Again, it's never really colored my life. I just say that this could perhaps be a cause. But I like to think I'm lesbian because I want to be, not because I have to be. Because my genes and my hormones say you are a lesbian and you must therefore follow this course. I mean, I feel that I have a choice. And because I like women and I love the woman I live with, my choice is a happy one.
You get a very energetic, intelligent, lively girl, and she grows used through her childhood to hearing people around her saying, "Oh, you should have been a boy."
I haven't lived at home since I was 18, and I wasn't going to tell my father. I'm not very close to him, but I didn't want to unnecessarily upset him. I don't really think he'd understand it anyway. But eventually I did write and tell him, and his reaction to me directly was, "Oh, I don't know much about this scene." But I think personally he feels that he has failed me in some respect, which is completely untrue, because I had the sort of upbringing that was really good. And I don't, he shouldn't feel guilty about it at all. It's nothing to do with him, actually. It's no reflect. I mean, psychiatrists give you thousands of reasons for being gay, you know, not having a mother, perhaps they'd say was one, and your father's reactions, but I don't think that's true at all.
I have told my mother, but she won't accept it. I think she still thinks I'm going through a phase. She has said this to me, that I'm going through a phase. You know, she said this to me 5, 6 years ago.
It's quite a long phase. What about your father? Or stepfather? You've got a stepfather.
Yes, I have a stepfather. I never discussed anything with him at all. My mother's the most important, you know, parent in my life, really. But we get on very well.
My mother knew about 13, 14 years ago when I was in the army. And my father knew when I was about, when I first began to understand and realise what was happening. I was about 12 or 13. And in fact, he sent me along to a doctor to see if I could be cured, which was, when the answer came back, "No, terribly sorry, this is a homosexual phase which one is going through, you'll just have to accept it," he sort of went away and forgot all about it.
I wonder if I could ask you a question. As taxi drivers, you must see a fair bit of life and meet all kinds of people. What do you think about lesbians?
This is a man. Hey, Jack. You're just in time, Jack. I think lesbians are sick people.
What?
Lesbians are sick people and should be treated as such.
Well, I think this is something latent in the person when they're born, and then it's triggered off by environment.
It must be an illness then, like I just
It's
said.
triggered off by environment. Some people can suppress it more than others. Some people can live. You know, there are people who've got puff tendencies who suppress it all their life and never go with men.
Oh, I know when I was on night work, I used to take two girls who worked in a club, and they were brass actually. They used to play the game, but they were living together, you know. So I suppose you could call them bisexual, but in actual fact they were lesbians, you know. They were, you know, they were just like any other people. I didn't see them as freaks. They didn't look like freaks. They just look like ordinary people. I suppose they just don't fancy men. I also don't fancy men.
Have you been out with men?
Yes, I've been out with men. Yes, I had a boyfriend when I was about 18, I think. 18, yeah. And he was 18 too. He was very sweet. I heard he died, actually, just recently. About a year ago, he died from drugs. He'd been taking drugs. He'd been taking them ever since I left him, actually. And I told him, we got on ever so well, you know. I was very, very fond of him. I suppose I loved him, and he loved me. But when it came to anything sort of more physical than just loving each other, you know, there was just nothing there, nothing at all. So I told him. So, you know, it just ended.
I'm no man-hater. I went out with men for several years when I was at college. I suppose I've been gay since I was about 14, but I couldn't accept it myself. I think this is conditioning. You're made to feel that it's something sordid and freaky, and especially if you live in the country, it just doesn't happen. You don't meet people like that, or you don't recognise them. But I don't feel emotionally for men. I felt physically for men, but not emotionally. What I felt for women is much deeper.
Emotionally, it could be anything. It could be a camel, quite frankly. Because I feel nothing for men. Nothing at all. They're people that are wandering about. They could be Martians. They mean no more to me than that. I would never say I dislike men, because I don't. I'm just indifferent, completely indifferent. I find them completely cold, completely hard, and completely selfish.
I feel they're all right in their place. No, I like men. I've got lots of friends who are men. Perhaps I haven't been very lucky in my men. You know, I've never met a man who I can be as friendly with as with a woman. Sexually, I've had some pleasant relationships. But it's just, I've never loved a man, I don't think.
I can talk to men, yeah. Among my friends, there's a lot of men among my friends. But there again, they're mostly gay. But I've got no difficulty in getting on with men, you know. I think I'm quite well integrated, really. But I would never go out with a man, because to me it would be a sheer waste of time.
You know, I don't recognize them as being part of me at all.
I quite enjoy their company.
I don't, particularly.
Because, you
I'm
know,
bored.
They can be quite amusing.
Well, this is your attitude. I mean, I am completely bored by it. Even the most interesting man bores me intensely.
I like gentle people, and perhaps quite a few men aren't gentle, although I love them very much as friends. And I just don't feel that they're any different, really, from women. They're a little stronger, that's all, but we really are all the same.
You can't say to a man, I don't like men, because it's not true. It's not, I don't like men. Of course I like men. I mean, you know, they're part of the world. But I don't like hurting people. And obviously, what's a man going to say when if you turn around to them and said, yeah, I'm a lesbian?
If I'm approached by a man who is particularly aggressive, like, you may be lesbian, but that excites me all the more, I'm going to take you to bed because I'm going to do you good, now my immediate reaction is to turn my back and to walk away. This again excites a male all the more because they've really got to take you to bed because you are lesbian, you know, it really excites them. But if on the other hand it's a person who understands lesbian but they still want to sleep with you because they feel that you can do them good as well.
It's either something to watch because they feel, as you say, stimulated by it, or it's something absolutely vile.
Have you ever seen a lesbian, two lesbians doing what they've got to do, performing? You have?
I've seen it on film, yeah.
On film? On film, in the flesh, have you seen it? Ah.
Two lesbians I knew who lived together, who worked in the club, who were nightclub girls.
You know that,
They're nice girls. I wasn't talking about them mentally or morally.
They look masculine.
They didn't look masculine. They looked fairly ordinary girls to me. And perhaps one of the girls, or both of them, couldn't get any sexual satisfaction from a man. And yet they found something in each other.
But what is it you can love in a woman that you can't love in a man?
Just because they are women. Just for being a woman.
You mean physically?
It's not, physically and mentally and I think mostly emotionally. There's nothing in a man, to me, you know, to love.
When I was very young, it was completely natural to want to kiss a woman, to want to put my arm around her. But it's only the people's attitudes towards it that make you think there's something wrong with it, and then you begin to question yourself and feel guilty. And this is why people have so many hang-ups, and I don't think they should have hang-ups about this at all.
Well, I think most things stem from physical attraction, always. You find you get more rapport with someone that you find you're physically attracted to. And if you're physically attracted to women, then it's obvious that you're going to get on better with them.
I like women better than men. I find women kinder, tenderer, easier to get on with. I find that men expect you to take a certain pose. Most men, it's a very rare man that doesn't, expect you to be a little woman. And I want to be myself. I don't want to be what some man wants me to be. And women don't ask that of you. They're happy for you to be yourself, as long as you let them be themselves. And I find life much easier like that.
I think women perhaps are a little more gentle sometimes, a little more understanding, and perhaps care a little deeper. Not that I have anything against men. I love men very much. It's just that I do find that women are more tender in every way, and perhaps we want to satisfy.
I feel sorry for men, in a way, because they think they satisfy women left, right and centre, when in actual fact they don't do a damn thing. I think this is quite amusing. Yeah. A man can't, how much can I say, you know, they can't go to bed with a woman and sustain anything very long. A woman can go on forever and ever. And I think men are completely selfish where sex is involved. Men are really basically concerned with themselves.
Out to please themselves.
Whereas women are not.
Women automatically
want
think of the other person
women
also.
And they understand what women want more than men.
Because even
quite naturally,
even
because
in
they're
a
women
normal
themselves.
relationship, in a normal relationship where you've got a husband and wife, the wife always thinks more about the physical needs of her husband, normally, than what the husband thinks about the wife. And when you've got two women, each is thinking more about the other. And I think you get a far more satisfactory result.
Women do understand each other much more than men and women. There is this thing that attracts people heterosexually, they call it the battle of the sexes, you know, and they tend to make excuses, you know. They say, oh, well, that's because he's a man or because she's a woman. I don't agree with this. I think people should be compatible emotionally as well as physically.
All my subjects, whom I interviewed, told me that they have been unable ever to fall in love with a man and, as you say, to relate emotionally to them. And actually, that is the crux of the matter. And I have, well, coined a new name for the, in my view, misnomer of female homosexuality, and certainly, because it is, in fact, homo-emotionality. It is an emotional condition and not a sexual condition, which really determines the whole subject of lesbianism.
Lesbians are ill. I think it's an illness and they should be treated as such by psychiatric treatment if possible, that's all.
How can you say that?
I think to any normal person, lesbianism is more revolting than homosexuality, because people knew really about homosexuality with the Romans and the Greeks and never with women.
I find it much more acceptable with women than with men.
Oh,
what more acceptable?
Sorry,
I don't know, I can't really...
The relationship
Yes,
because you're a lady lesbian.
You find it more acceptable?
Why would you skirt
I don't know, I'm just telling you that
You can't just make a statement and not know why.
That's right.
Well, maybe
Well,
it's
that's stupid, isn't
maybe it's because I consider that love and affection is more concerned with women than men. I think men are more animalistic.
Definitely to judge or decide upon before hearing the whole case. To condemn unheard or damage caused to a person. I think that's rather good because this is what this program's all about, isn't it?
The law applies to male homosexuals, as you know, but it doesn't apply to women. And I think that this has a great deal to do with it. I don't think people are as concerned with what women do in the same sense as they are concerned with what men do. But also I think there's a great deal of astonishment when it is realized how much homosexuality exists among women. You know, I think it's something that people just don't believe is a very great force at all.
Just recently, I was turned out of my friend's house very suddenly by her son after he discovered that his mother and I were lovers. He gave me 10 minutes to pack and threatened me with the police if I didn't leave. But he was right, in a way, do you see? But he should have spoken to me in a different way because he didn't think. He thought only, perhaps, of his mother, you see.
There's always this stigma that one attaches to homosexuality, that they feel that if you're a homosexual, then there's something wrong with you, particularly with the men. You know, I tried to explain this earlier. Like, for example, this two very good people had been living together for a long, long time, and one partner died. And the other partner, who has, as I said, had been living with all this time, wasn't even allowed to go to the funeral because the parents and the relatives just didn't want her there because they thought this was terrible.
There's no question about it that the homosexual woman in England and in Europe and America even more is under enormous social pressure which creates great anxiety and frustration and leads to neurotic, very often accentuates neurotic disturbances.
The butch masculine always has this terrible difficulty of being terrified of being found out. Like a friend recently who worked as a hotel manager and was taken on as a male manager, but they discovered that in fact she was female, so she was thrown out immediately into the street with suitcases and everything. Yet was holding down a very good position as hotel manager and had been running it for about 6 months and nobody discovered it.
I had a job, and when they found out that I liked women, which was over a telephone conversation the telephonist listened into, I was immediately stared at, ostracized, criticized.
And sacked eventually.
Eventually, yes, I was sacked
That's what
because of
happens.
it. My work was almost perfect. I mean, I'm not bragging about it, but it was. And because of this problem, if you choose to call it that, I was fired. But I mean, I didn't go around to the other secretaries in the building and say, how about a quickie in bed, you know? I mean, I didn't do
It
this.
doesn't happen because...
You don't do this, you don't fancy every woman you see.
I had a very, very brief career in Hollywood, and I think perhaps I did earn my living as a radio actress. And I had a husband and wife who were agents. They were very lovely people. And I remember in my day in Hollywood in the 40s, it was rather important that one did have to sleep around. There was no doubt about it. I'm being very honest about it. And I was unable to do it.
Financially, it is very much more difficult because when the average wage of a woman is less than half that of the average wage of a man, obviously 2 men living together are earning 4 times as much. And are therefore able to afford to throw parties, entertain people on their own ground, which is the alternative to being asked out, and they can afford all kinds of comforts that 2 women just can't.
The men at work say very little. What they say among themselves, I don't know about. They seem to accept me as a person, which I think is important. If people get to know you as a person, they don't tend to put you into a box. They don't say, you're a lesbian, therefore you must be this, that and the other. They do take you as a person.
I mean, I don't go out of my way. I mean, I don't say, good afternoon, Mrs. Brown, I am a lesbian.
And I don't throw it in anybody's face, ever. I don't expect people to tell me or to sort of throw in my face what they do in bed or what they do with their particular friends. So obviously I don't do it to them. You know, it's my private life, and you know, obviously I want to keep it that way.
It's been fashionable up until quite recently to think of homosexuality in any form as a disease. Well, this is probably better than thinking of it as a crime, which is what hitherto applied in the male sphere at any rate. But unlike the gentleman who wrote to the Times recently and said this is a disease and it is contagious, our experience, and it's a pretty wide one, is that it is by no means a disease, and in fact where we have to look for the symptoms of in the whole thing is society, not the individual.
You know, I look fairly boyish, I suppose. If you're with a very feminine girl, they tend to think you must be the lesbian and the other girl is just somebody who's sort of got drawn into it, possibly seduced. This isn't a very common reaction now. More usually you find that if a couple of guys see you sitting in a pub, you feel you're obviously with this person, you're quite happy talking to them in their company. They can't believe that you can be just happy with a girl. You must be waiting for them to come and talk to you. And when they talk to you and you say, well, look, you know, this is my girlfriend, we're very happy together, they either sort of laugh and think it's very kinky, or they come out with one of their inevitable cliches, like, well, what do you really do together? Which I find very depressing, actually, because I wouldn't dream of going up to a married couple and saying, well, what do you do?
I think there are a lot of women who know that they have homosexual tendencies, but their economic and social situation is such that if they get pressure from their families and sisters who are younger than them marry, very often they will attempt to make a marriage work. There is a great deal of confusion in the idea, in the role that a woman plays in heterosexual marriage. You know, this idea of a passive partner and all the rest of it.
Now, I got married because, number one, my parents are the type of people that need this sort of thing. They feel inadequate.
They need everybody to feel that their daughter is quite normal and has got married and is having a happily married life. So,
very true, they do. And I mean, I've seen psychiatrists, we've all seen psychiatrists. But my parents need this, and in a way I love my parents. I mean, I think everyone does underneath all the problems and all the dramas and all the scenes and everything else.
One reason for the marriage 10 years ago, because my husband understood and accepted exactly what it was, and he wasn't out to change me in any way. He just accepted the fact that I was lesbian, but he thought, and I suppose possibly I still did think at that time, that it might be a phase which I was still going through, but it just hasn't proved to be the case.
There was one time I was going to get married, but he was a gay boy. And it was just, I think I was feeling very insecure at the time, and so was he. And I think we were going to do it to sort of please both our parents, and maybe eventually to have children, because we both like children. But it didn't come off. And we both got cold feet at the same time.
One man, I remember, in America, asked me to marry him, and he was such a dear, sweet soul that it didn't seem right. And at that time, I was getting a little frightened, as one does, alone. And it's not really much fun being a lesbian and alone in the world if you don't have any family. And so I told him, saw him again.
Someone who is of the same sex has something in her sensibilities and in her whole way of seeing things, feeling things, which is the same. In fact, it is the sameness of certain elementary emotional reactions which binds women emotionally together. If you think also of marriages, au fond, in every marriage, when it really is successful, and after a time, it is the sameness of interest, it is the sameness of feelings and attitudes which makes the bond, which makes the relationship, and which relates one to the other.
I do want a child. I want more than one. I want 2 children. I think it's bad to have just one child. And I will have a child.
Would you adopt children?
No, I want my own child. I don't think that's enough. You know, to me, I'm just a perfectly ordinary woman who has got a perfectly healthy maternal thing. You know, I'd just like to have a child. And I will.
Matter of fact, I used to have a dream about one. Sounds, don't laugh, but the dream would be in a maternity ward, and I'd be lying in bed, awfully big here, and sort of know that I was going to have a baby. And suddenly a sort of form would appear at the bottom of the bed and say the words again and again, "Immaculate Conception." This is really true. And then I'd wake up and feel myself and realize that I was dreaming.
I would like a child, if I was honest enough. I would like children, very much. But the only problem is, first of all, I don't feel emotionally, physically. If I was living with a woman, then the chances of having children, I mean, it would be sensational. And quite frankly, I think it would be quite a lot. But
one of your stronger moments.
In one of my stronger moments, it might happen, but I very much doubt it.
A very old couple of mine who've been together 10, 12 years, and they've been allowed to adopt a child down in south of England because they've been together for over 10 years and they're providing an absolutely perfect home. Both mentally, physically, the child is beautifully looked after, and there are no sort of mental, well, I'd use the word hang-ups, you know, discriminations. People just don't know any difference.
Well, it's always difficult for a woman on her own to bring up a child. I mean, whether you're lesbian or straight or widowed, it's always difficult for a woman on her own, because I think most children do need a man or a stronger influence around. But one thing I do feel very strongly about, I think it's far better for a child to grow up within the framework of a loving relationship than to grow up in a loveless home where the parents quarrel and shout all the time. Now he's little, he doesn't see anything abnormal in my relationship at all. When he's older, I think there are going to be all sorts of problems. I mean, people have told me this, and I can see them for myself quite easily. You know, he's going to have problems from older children at school who are going to say things to him, and he, in his sweet little innocence, is going to let things out, which I wouldn't think of hiding from him, but to other children who have smutty little minds anyway. It might be rather difficult for him older, when he's older.
I think most of the women today, even the sort of typical suburban type housewife, most of their husbands are away most of the time, businessmen travelling all the time. It's the women that bring the actual children up and give them most of the needs.
One of the things that is a tragedy with these women is that because they're homosexual, they're not necessarily bad mothers. But I've found that more often than not, the husbands react quite violently and usually swoop the children from under them and sue them for divorce, very often on the grounds of their homosexuality, and the children are removed from their care on the basis that because they're homosexual, they're not good mothers. And this is really quite a tragedy to a lot of them, because both men and women who are homosexual can be potentially very wonderful parents.
And I think if they do it in privately, although it's repulsive to me bringing up the family, and I've got a daughter, bless her, but to think that it's out in the open, I mean, you go around any of these cinemas and see all this nudity all the time, that is just as repulsive.
Arena 3 is the one and only female homosexual magazine for women. Generally, it's just a magazine for people to keep in touch with one another. There's a personal ads column as well, which is just a reader's column. But it, you know, it consists of sort of articles and short stories, and anybody who cares to write their feelings in a letter of free speech.
Oh, I've had hordes of men who thought that it must be a kinky magazine because they saw the word lesbian, and this is a kind of conditioned reflex. They see the word lesbian and at once it's got to be a dirty book. And when I gave my own address as the editor of the magazine, I asked people to write to my address. I was besieged by men. I had one gentleman masturbating on the doorstep with excitement, and another man who said he was a sadist, and could I introduce him to one of my readers who was a masochist, and well, all kinds of things. One gentleman wrote in and said he would like his 5 shillings back because there was nothing in the magazine about football. Arena 3 does enable people to meet, say, a graduate teacher who wants to meet other teachers can put a small advertisement in. She'll then meet people in her own age group with her own kind of interests. She may be a nurse who wants to meet other nurses. And this is far, far better than taking a chance in scruffy little dives.
I love going to nice places to eat. I love going to nice restaurants. But you can't do it with a woman because you have to go to an underground place, and they're all underground, which makes it seems like the days before drink was allowed, you know, prohibition.
One in particular where it's quite a nice place, very nice surroundings.
But they let
and
all
the
gay
gentleman,
people in.
no, but the gentleman there said it's a gay club. He invited all gay people in London to come and become members of this club.
And then?
And then, as soon as he got our membership,
he let straight people in.
He let straight people in and wanted to throw us out.
As voyeurs.
Because the only way to get a good membership in a grotty club like his was
to have
get
an attraction.
Yes, and we were the attraction.
And how do you like living your life being an attraction to other people?
In other words, you go down to the club as one thing, and you come back and you have to change into a different type of world.
You feel relaxed because there are just gay girls there. You don't feel that you're going to be chatting up somebody who's heterosexual who's probably just down there for kicks. But at the same time, the people who go there aren't really themselves when they get there. They adopt this mask as they walk into a club, perhaps because they feel that they've got to put on some kind of show towards their own kind. They've got to be, again, they've got to fit into a role within the homosexual scene.
You see, they are completely different people than those you may find next to you, your neighbor, or in your profession. Most of them are not recognizable. They behave under a mask, and only when they are among themselves the mask falls.
some of these films that have come out, they're box office attractions. The Killing of Sister George, I would like to mention.
Oh, which was ghastly.
Because it is a very bad representation of gay life. You get the big dyke who struts around in her tweeds and brogues. I've got a tweed on, that's not very clever.
but we're not like that, you know.
Who struts around in her tweeds and brogues, smoking cigars. I mean, I don't remember the time I've met a woman who smokes cigars.
I do from time to time.
Well, I've never been fortunate enough, my dear. But, you know, they're all young, dolly girls that are typists, that are hairdressers.
That are models, you know, attractive
this
people.
sort of thing, very attractive.
The lesbian is still a figure of fun. I mean, she's still thought of as the great big butch creature with the cruel cut and the Eton collar and the tie. I mean, if you said lesbian to my mother, that's immediately what she'd think.
A few years back, you would have had the collar and tie and shirt and cufflinks and a pair of tweed trousers and brogue shoes. But today you get, I suppose one can use the word hippie, you get more of a hippie type. Lesbian, much more feminine, much more peaceful.
But I think there are very few people who are very masculine or very feminine in any scene, heterosexual or homosexual. I think they're the minority, actually.
You can't recognise a homosexual where you can recognise a Negro. But a Negro can equally recognise all other Negroes, and a homosexual can't. So the Negro is not isolated in his minority. The homosexual is in an unpopular minority and isolated within it too. So this makes it much worse.
Every human being is bisexual by nature, and a woman is more bisexual than a man. Quite simply for anatomical reasons and physiological reasons. Therefore, the homosexuality of women is in a way a more natural phenomenon as the homosexuality of men in this particular sense.
I think the age when, you know, when you can put people into one box and say the man is very masculine, the woman is very feminine, these days of having this definite role are over.
I think it's marvellous to see these youngsters with the wonderful glossy hair and clothing which really is pleasant to look at, and the fact that they don't have to, the men in particular, don't have to emphasise their gender identity by having short back and sides and trousers and a jacket and so on, that they feel sufficiently masculine that they can wear gorgeous frilly shirts and well, skirts if they want to, and know that their girls know damn well that they're masculine, so they haven't got to bother to emphasise it.
Is it possible for a female homosexual relationship to be a really happy one?
I do not think so. Not 100%. There's always some frustration in it. Either the fact that there are no children is very hurtful, almost injurious to some people. And as you know, many just go out and have children and go on with their children to live with other women. But in the purely physical relationship is, in my view, nothing else but an expression of the emotional union.
Well, I don't think of myself as not heterosexual. I mean, I happen to be a woman who is in love with another woman, so therefore I am a lesbian. But I can't see myself as abnormal. I can't see myself as well, I'm not wholly homosexual because I do have relationships with men from time to time. But at the present, you know, I'm having a very loving relationship with a woman, and I don't need men. I mean, I don't want.
I think that it's unfortunate but true that we are more possessive, possibly. And I think it's probably because in a normal married relationship of wife and mother, one's love is more divided, whereas we have to concentrate on one person, and we're so terribly afraid we're going to lose them, which is understandable. I myself have probably lost at least 2 friends by being too possessive. Friends who didn't want to be possessed quite so much.
I think that you can get 2 women who are terribly possessive, terribly anxious that if they lose their partner, where will they ever find another? And one may be very domineering and the other rather placid and docile. And I think you can get a suet pudding sort of relationship where you've got two dumplings sitting together and very stodgy.
Two lesbian couples who live with each other for a while, maybe it's only 6 weeks or 2 years, they have what they have between them, and they don't need to envy a happily married couple at all, because they just go through so many different phases with different women, until maybe they do settle down with one woman in particular.
An affair, it's automatically something that's going to end. But if it was a marriage, it'd be so much easier.
And I think people wouldn't be so promiscuous in the gay society.
No.
I mean, the gay society is so promiscuous, you know, it's leaping in and out of bed with everybody you meet, nearly.
Well,
I mean,
not quite. Speak for yourself.
No, it's quite true. I mean, you might see somebody once, and then the second time you sleep with them, simply because this is the only way you can make contact and feel close to someone.
I agree with you, though. It is the only way.
It is. I mean, you can't sort of court each other like you would in a normal society.
You can't say, let's get engaged, and then in a year's time we'll get married, and then we'll sleep together, because you know you can't get married. You can't have a normal relationship.
So consequently, you live with each other after about a couple of weeks or 3 weeks,
if you
which is a terrible mistake. You know, we go to the laundrette once a week, we get our groceries, we pay our rent, we do everything that everyone else does.
But we're made to feel
the only
so
thing we
bloody
do
odd.
that is different, we buy the same sort of clothes. I look the same as a million other girls in London. So do you, don't you? The only difference is that under the bed covers, we prefer to make love with women instead of men. A good example. We were going up the Edgware Road, having been to the supermarket and doing every normal thing that everybody does.
Going
like
shopping.
Collecting green shield stamps and all the rest of it. And we stopped at a bus stop, and I held my girlfriend's hand.
Someone fell out of a car, someone had a screaming fit.
A woman at the bus stop looked as if she was going to have convulsions all over the place. And I thought to myself, you poor thing.
I'd give anything, absolutely anything, to have our abnormality, as it's considered, just a normal part of everyday living, because that's how we are. We don't want to be different. We're the same.
I want a child, and that will take up about 75%, you know, of my life. I want a dog. I'm having one for my birthday. As to relationships, well, they come and they go.
I can't see any reason for this relationship not to go on and on and on. But if one entered into a relationship thinking, well, it's all right, it's only for 3 months or it's only for 3 weeks, I think one would be an immoral person. So I hope and I pray that this relationship will last me a lifetime. I mean, I'm an optimist.
Well, I'm a Scorpio and incurably optimistic. I always think that something marvelous is going to happen. I'm going to win the Irish sweep or something. And if I did, I think I'd probably adopt 2 or 3 small boys of all sorts of mixed nationalities and live on a boat in the south of France, and we'd all have a ball.
Surely in this day and age it's so difficult to hang on to your own individuality, that we're all minorities, and also everybody has their own particular minority, and everybody fears everybody else to a certain extent. There is a lot of suspicion, and I think this is what sometimes makes people antagonistic towards us, and makes a lot of gay people feel that people are antagonistic towards them. They feel that other people are suspicious, perhaps because they're suspicious of them. I think it works both ways.
I would like to see the whole problem of social minorities tackled on a sensible line, because there are certain minorities who one could describe as scapegoat minorities. There are Jews, Negroes, people from the next village who are all foreigners, and people who are different from oneself in some way being penalised. And I think that the social attitudes to these scapegoat minorities ought to be investigated.
For a start, people were writing more articles to bring the subject of homosexuality out into the open. Programs like this, for example, which are helping to alleviate the fears of people who just don't understand what homosexuality is all about.
I feel that this programme is a good idea because it might make society realise that we are human beings, that we're not something to throw into a nut house.
I think we're going to be very unfortunate, actually, because we're just going to be a tiny little step like that, which will make a few people think. And then someone will think it's a good idea to do something more. And there'll be more films like it, about ordinary people that happen to be homosexual.